We've all been conditioned to believe that comparison is a thing to be feared. But in reality, it's the exact tool that took me from a chronically insecure kid who was terrified at how he measured up to everyone else to the self-assured man that I consider myself today. See, everyone treats comparison like it's the thief of joy. But I know from experience that if you make a simple distinction, it becomes a giver of unstoppable momentum. In this video, we're looking at how you can flip that switch in your own head without years of mindset training so that you can finally start using other people's success as your fuel rather than a reason to hate yourself. What I want to clear up right away is that comparison isn't just one thing. There are actually two different types of comparison that do very different things to your mental health and daily drive. The first is what we call self-worth oriented comparison. This is the one you're likely used to. It's that nagging feeling of lesser than when you see something that someone else has that you really want, then you start endlessly berating yourself for not having it. Compare this to improvement-oriented comparison. You look at the cool thing somebody else has, you know you really want that thing, and it fuels your drive and ambition to go out and get that thing. It's the same cause, but with a slightly different twist. The distinction between these two types is why ambitious people often end up in self-criticism. They switch between these two forms of comparison like mood swings, and will constantly feel behind despite improving at a rate that far surpasses that of their younger selves. That's the point where self-comparison becomes self-loathing, or in other words, you flip between the two types. I consider myself a very comparison-oriented person. Every time I see someone with something that I really want, whether that's a tightly knit group of friends, thriving business, or even the ability to dunk a basketball, I used to immediately reflect that back on myself. I'd beat myself up for not eating well enough to get that body, not going out enough to make those friends, and not being brave enough to start that business. Nowadays, although that still does happen, and it never really stops happening, I've learned how to pull myself up on it, and quickly switch into improvement-oriented comparison. These might look like the same thing, but there's a slight difference in underlying motive. That is the difference between comparison that fuels your drive and ambition and growth, and comparison that fuels your self-loathing. Imagine two runners side by side. One is running purely to beat the guy next to him. The other is running to smash his personal record and using the other guy as a reason to pace himself. They're both running at the same pace, but the second guy is gonna enjoy the run a lot more, even if he doesn't win, because his head is simply in the right space. As a species, we're wired to view life through the lens of victory and defeat. It's a simple byproduct of our desire to survive and achieve social status within our tribe. But it also comes at a cost. When life is framed as victory and defeat, comparison becomes tied to ego and superiority. This creates a zero-sum mindset where everyone's success feels like your personal loss. If you've seen someone achieve something and feel a pang of guilt, or asking, why haven't I done that yet? This is literally you. This even shows up in the case where we see someone doing something bad, like doom scrolling on their phone, and we feel superior to them in a strange sort of way. I get caught in this thinking all the time, and that's actually partially why I made this video, I guess. So the difference between self-worth oriented comparison that makes everyone's win feel like your loss, and improvement-oriented comparison that motivates you to enact positive change in your life is whether you're comparing to improve your own life, or if you're doing it to pursue victory and or avoid defeat over others. This is why comparison turns unhealthy when left unchecked. Because we're wired for tribal survival, slipping into this trap is just so easy. Pulling yourself out, that takes active strategy. Fortunately, there are two dead simple tactics that I use to make flipping that switch a lot easier. And these both follow the same thread that will let you design your own strategies that work for you. So see if you can guess what that thread is before I get to it. Avoiding self-talk around comparisons is hard. That's a very real objection to the stuff that I've been saying. They just seem to crop up randomly and have a funny knack of just coming along and ruining your day. I'm not going to tell you to try to eliminate these comments. That's a cop-out strategy, and honestly not something you'll be able to do every hour of every day. What does help, however, is following a comparison comment with a creator comment. Here's an example from my own life. I talked to someone about fun night they had out last night and how close they are to their group of friends. That's something that I really want, but I don't really have right now. When I hear stuff like that, my mind immediately goes to, well, why don't you have that? You must be too lazy to go out and form those friendships. You're a social failure. You're falling behind. Sometimes those thoughts are true, but when I do manage to pull myself up on thoughts like that, I follow it with something like, so what are you gonna do about it? I'm gonna get into rooms that filter for like-minded individuals. Don't feel bad for not going out and party, because that's not my vibe anyway. A creator comment like that is something you say to yourself that aids to take yourself out of the emotional reaction mode, which is where self-worth-oriented comparison lives, and into your action-oriented mode, which is where improvement-oriented comparison lives. Even if you only manage to follow up a comparison comment with a creator comment 30% of the time, it will go a surprisingly long way in your life not feeling like a constant courtroom where you're always on trial, and start feeling like a game that you actually enjoy playing. If creator comments feel like too big a thing for you to do every time, there is a second, much easier psychological trick I like to use, and it's called investigation. Here's what I mean. When you impulsively make a comparison comment, that's not something you should take for granted. In fact, it's actually pointing towards something that is clearly very important to you. If you don't care how much you drink and party, you don't get jealous when other people tell you what a crazy night they had drinking and partying. But when you hear about something that someone has that you really do want, like having a closely knit group of friends was for me, the comparison comments will start flooding in. That's a signal it'd be wise to investigate. Even doing something as simple as asking, why do I feel bad about not having that? Is scarily good at stopping yourself in the moment when you would otherwise tumble into a vicious cycle of negative emotions, and instead transforming that situation into a chance at learning how you operate just that little bit better. Now, those two strategies actually have a common base. That is genuinely one of the best ways to quickly flip from self-worth-oriented comparison to improvement-oriented comparison, sort of like a light switch. You might have noticed at this point in your life that these comments often come from a place of emotion. That's an ancient part of your brain coordinating that. It's called the limbic system. Sure, it elicits stress responses that keep you alive, but those stress responses also make those comments hit 10 times harder. Flipping from that area to your brain to the more modern part responsible for even-headed thinking is as simple as slowing everything down. The reason creator comments and investigation works so well, at least in my experience, is because they force you to step back, slow everything down, and look at things from a third perspective. That's a situation the modern part of the brain is literally designed to activate for. Seriously, when you start looking at emotional comments, slowing down, asking yourself, is there a thing behind this comment that's worth looking into? You will start to notice so many more things about the way that you work. In general, learn how to have a better time and actually start to love yourself in a way that you might not have before. If you've gotten a decent bit of value from this video, YouTube thinks you'll love this video of mine. So I'd go take a look at that, I guess.